barbecue. Hello everybody and welcome to another video from Jack and Blue Barbecue. Today we will be making pizza. Taking a slight detour from the normal barbecue, but we are going to be making it outside in the 1050. The 1050 is a charcoal gravity fed smoker. So effectively today we will be making a charcoal fired pizza. The Masterbuilt 1050 can get a lot hotter than the oven in my house. The oven in my house can get up to about 550 degrees, but the 1050 can get up to 700 degrees. So I've been making pizza for a little while now, but getting up to a 700 degree cook temperature should really create a nice crispiness on the outside of the crust that forms very quickly at that temperature, leaving the inside to be still chewy and soft. So I'm really excited to see how this turns out. Most traditional pizza ovens operate at 1,000 degrees or more. That seems to be the consensus from the research that I've done. So at 700 degrees, we're not going to be able to get to the temperature that you'd get in a gourmet pizzeria somewhere, but we're going to get close, and it's better than our home oven, and with that charcoal flavor on there, I'm really excited. All right, let's make a pizza. For our pizza, we're going to make the dough from scratch. This process takes 24 to 48 hours to let that dough develop. That means you're going to want to start this process 1 to 2 days before you plan on eating the pizza. Our pizza dough is going to consist of 6 ingredients: bread flour, sugar, instant yeast, olive oil, water, and kosher salt. To get started, get yourself a large mixing bowl. The recipe we're going to use today will make 4 12-inch pizzas or 3 16-inch pizzas. So think about the number of pizzas you're trying to make and adjust the recipe as needed. I'll post the recipe along with some tips in the description below. For this video, I'll be making 1 16-inch pizza, but I like to keep extra pizza dough on hand for whenever you want to throw together a fresh made pizza at home. So the first thing we're going to add is 3.5 cups of bread flour. To our bread flour, we're going to add about a tablespoon of olive oil and 1 teaspoon of kosher salt. Give these ingredients a quick stir. Don't worry about mixing everything together for now, just a quick stir. When you're stirring this, kind of make a little hole right in the middle there where we're going to put our wet ingredients in just a minute. Now the purpose of mixing together our wet ingredients separately is to activate our instant yeast. This yeast needs to be activated because it's a living organism, so there's a little chemistry involved with making pizza. Yeast, as a living organism, consumes the sugar and the protein in the sugar and the flour. As a byproduct, it gives off a gas that creates bubbles in our dough. That's why bread rises. And that's the purpose behind making our dough 1 to 2 days in advance. We have to give the dough time for the yeast to do what it does and develop the flavor of our dough. So we are going to add 1 teaspoon of instant yeast. To give the yeast something to feed on, we're going to add 1/2 teaspoon of sugar. When we add water to this yeast, it's important that the temperature be approximately 110 degrees. This activates the yeast, which is necessary for the yeast to begin consuming the sugars and the proteins in our dough. Now I'm pretty lucky. In my house, I've experimented with this enough times to know that if I turn my hot water on and let it run till it gets as hot as it can, the water gets up to approximately 112 degrees. But if you don't have that convenience, throw some water in the microwave, check it with a thermometer. You want your temperature to be around 110 degrees. If it's too high, you'll kill the yeast. And if it's too low, the yeast won't activate. So make sure the water is the right temperature before adding it into the yeast. Once you've mixed together these ingredients, just take a spoon and give them a gentle stir. Remember, yeast is a living organism, so you want to be gentle with it. But just give these ingredients a little mix. Once they're mixed together, we're going to let this sit for about 5 to 10 minutes. That gives the yeast time to activate, so when we add it to our wet ingredients, it does what we want it to do. Okay, so our yeast has been setting up for about 5 minutes now. You can tell if it's activated by giving it a smell. Should smell like bread. It smells like bread. So now we're going to mix together our ingredients. We'll just mix these around until they begin to set up a dough. When you're mixing together your dough, it's important to consider some environmental features like humidity. You may need to add more water to your mixture if it's particularly dry outside. So if your dough doesn't feel like it's setting up correctly, it's okay to add a little bit of water at a time until you get the right look for your dough. We're gonna mix this together until we have one solid piece that is no longer sticking to the walls of the bowl. Once the dough starts sticking together, get your hands in there and start kneading it together. All right, our dough looks pretty good. At this point, I can pick it up in a solid piece out of our bowl. Now let's prep our kneading surface. So the dough doesn't stick to our kneading surface, throw down a layer of some bread flour. With the dough ready to go, feel free to go back to your bowl. If there's some little pieces in there, just drop those right on. We'll work them in. Okay, so we've worked our dough into a nice looking piece. Now we're gonna shape it into a ball. So at this point, some people might wrap this dough completely in saran wrap. What I'm gonna do is put this in a bowl and tightly cover the dough with saran wrap. Okay, now that we've got our dough nice and tucked in there, we're gonna let this do its thing for about 3 to 4 hours. When we come back, we should see the dough approximately double in size. If your dough doesn't double in size or grow from its original shape, it's most likely due to the fact that your yeast was not activated. The yeast could be old if you've had it for a long time, or that water could have been off in temperature. You can still make a pizza with this dough, but the texture just won't be the same as what we're going for. All right, so we'll come back in 3 to 4 hours. It's been 4 hours now. Check out what's happened to this dough. So this piece of dough has become much, much bigger. Here's a before and after picture to give you guys an idea. So as you can see, when we first made the dough, nice tight ball, almost felt a little bit dry, but given a couple hours, letting that yeast work, it's grown much bigger. Touching the dough now, it's soft, it's fluffy, it's light, and that's what the yeast has done. Now we're going to take this big piece and separate it into 3 smaller pieces. Each small piece will be 1 16-inch pizza, so we'll be cutting this dough into thirds. Each one of these pieces gets stored for 24 to 48 hours. The dough will continue to grow, the flavor will continue to develop, and that's what's going to give us a really amazing crust for this pizza. You're going to want to put down some more bread flour so that this dough doesn't end up sticking to your surface. So we'll take this dough out of the bowl. You can see some of the bubbles just underneath the surface. I don't know how well the camera's picking that up, but you can see the work that the yeast has done on this thing. So we'll take our dough out of our bowl, stick to the sides just a little bit. Now I want to separate this dough into 3 equally sized pieces. They don't have to be perfect. If you have a food scale, you can certainly use that. But I just tend to eyeball it. And you can always take a little bit off of a larger piece, hand it over to another to make sure that they get to be the right size. There's no harm in pulling off a piece and slapping it onto another one. Okay. So we'll shape these into a ball. That's the shape we're going to want them to be in as we store them. A nice healthy round shape without any ridges on it is what we're shooting for. And if there are cracks in the dough, go ahead and just pinch them together. Just work it around. Try and get a clean, smooth surface across the dough. I'd say I got pretty close, but I think this one's got a little bit of extra dough on it. So it's okay to go ahead and just pull a chunk of that dough right off. Just reshape this piece. And then you can just work this right into the other dough. That yeast that's in there is going to continue to activate, so these pieces are still growing. So by reshaping these like this now, you won't even be able to tell that that took place once these have rested for 24 to 48 hours. So that's a great looking piece right there. I'm just going to continue to work out the cracks and try and get a smooth surface. And I kind of try and pull all the cracks down to the bottom here. So smooth on top. Here's what we've got on the bottom. So on the bottom, we can work this together. And then just give it a spin on your surface. That friction on the bottom will help to seal that up. And I'm just using this part of my hand to almost touch my pinkies together and squeeze that dough to try and seal these together. So those look pretty good at this point. So we're ready for our olive oil. Our olive oil is going to be used on the dough itself as well as to line the inside of the container. So I'm actually going to use 2 containers for these 3 pieces. For the first one, I'm going to put 1 dough ball in this. But I want to show you guys it's okay to go ahead and put them in the same container. So I'll put 2 in this larger container. You just want to make sure that the container is large enough that that dough has room to expand. Because like I said, that yeast is still alive and these will continue to grow and develop their flavor over 24 to 48 hours. So I'm going to oil up the inside of these containers quick. Putting oil on the inside of a container serves 2 purposes. One, it's not going to let our dough stick to the outside of it. This dough is going to grow, it's going to press itself into the sides of this container. And so this olive oil will help to keep it from sticking to the container. The other purpose is flavor. Olive oil is a very flavorful oil. This pizza dough will absorb some of that flavor while it sits and develops over the next 24 to 48 hours. So that's 1 container. Okay, so our container is oiled up. Now we're going to treat our dough balls. Go ahead and put a little bit of oil right on top. It's okay if you have too much, you just wipe it off your counter when you're done. Oh, that's a lie. Like I said, you wipe it off the counter when you're done, and you just want to coat this, and you can use that oil that's on there and put a nice healthy coat on the outside of this thing. So with that, go ahead and set it right into your container. So we're going to repeat this process for all of our dough balls here. So here's what our dough looks like now that we've got them oiled up. We'll go ahead and seal these containers, throw them in the fridge, and when we come back, I'll show you what these look like about 24 hours from now. It's been 24 hours. Let's check out this dough. As you can see, significantly increased in size. They expanded right to those edges. That's why we put the olive oil there, and expanded into each other. Now, these actually come apart very easily because of the olive oil that we put on both of these pieces. You want to take these out of the fridge about 1 or 2 hours before you plan on making the pizza. The purpose of that is to let these come up to room temperature. If you try to roll the dough or press the dough into the shape of the crust while it's still cold like this, it's going to be really difficult. It's going to stay tight. It's going to retain its shape. So we need to let it warm up so we can get it into the shape that we want our pizza to be. So during that hour, we're going to do 2 things. We're going to make our sauce, and we're going to go fire up our grill, because that pizza stone that we're going to make these on has to come up to temperature, and ideally you want it to hold at that temperature for an hour. So that's what we're going to do. All right, getting ready to fire up the smoker here to get our pizza stone up to temperature. We're going to want to get this to 700 degrees today. So that's what will give us this really nice crust on the bottom of the pizza. I'm really excited to see how that turns out. I'm going to take the grates out for this one, because when I'm coming in and out with that big pizza peel, we are not going to want these to be in the way. One thing worth noting at this point, the pizza stone needs to be brought up to temperature along with the grill. If you were to get the grill hot and then go ahead and put this pizza stone, that would be too rapid of a temperature change for this. The pizza stone would crack. Any rapid temperature change, that's what will cause a pizza stone to crack. So think about that in your oven as well if you're using these inside. Also remember that when you are done grilling and letting everything cool down. All right, let's get this fired up. We are going to set our temperature to 700 degrees. Once the smoker comes up to temp and hits 700 degrees, that's when we're going to start our 1-hour timer. That's what's going to make our crust nice and crispy. Okay, I had to come get a shot of this. This thing's been running for 6 minutes. Look how fast the temperature climbs on this. Really cool. We hit 700 degrees. Now we'll come back in an hour. Whew. She's a warm one out there. Need a nice cold beverage to cool me down. Much better. Okay, now we're going to throw together our sauce. Our sauce is made up of canned, peeled tomatoes. There are a lot of different brands out there that you can get perfectly fine canned, peeled tomatoes. You want to look for a 28-ounce can. Any canned, peeled tomatoes will work. The best tomatoes for making pizza are San Marzano or Roma tomatoes. I buy this kind specifically because these are San Marzano tomatoes, and that's what pizza is supposed to be made with. However, any tomatoes will do as long as they are peeled tomatoes. 28-ounce can. Next up, we have basil. I've got about 10 leaves here. I've been making these pizzas so much that I actually went out and bought a couple basil plants just so I can always keep it on hand, because buying basil in the store is not cheap. But the basil that you can find in the store, as long as it's the whole leaves, will work for this recipe. We're also going to use olive oil, kosher salt, and garlic. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna get these tomatoes ready for the sauce. Canned tomatoes come with a lot of liquid inside of the can. We do not want that liquid. That liquid may have done some nice things to the tomatoes while they were shipped and stored on the shelves, but all that water is gonna do is make our sauce very runny. So here's what I do to get all the liquid off of these tomatoes. So I'm actually gonna use a strainer and I'm gonna pour my tomatoes out into that strainer. So a lot of that liquid that's on there will begin running out the bottom. I want it all out the bottom. When I first started doing this, I thought just shaking will be the right way to take all that liquid off of these tomatoes. But now I actually just hit them with a little bit of cold water. Like I said, that sauce that helped them out in the can is just going to add to the runniness of our sauce. These tomatoes have enough liquid inside of them to make the sauce the way we want to eat it. So just taking out a little bit of that moisture now is going to set up our sauce really nicely for us. Food processor, blender, whatever you want to use. I don't own a blender, so I use a food processor. This is a funky looking piece of garlic. Anyway, for our garlic, we're gonna go with 2 to 3 large cloves, depending on what you like. I always go with 3. Now we're gonna add our 10 basil leaves, 2 tablespoons of olive oil, 1, 2, about a tablespoon of kosher salt. Now the recipe calls for a tablespoon of kosher salt, but I almost always come back and add more salt afterwards. And lastly, about a tablespoon of crushed red pepper. You can leave this out if you don't like spicy foods, but I do think it adds a nice little kick to the sauce. Like I said, about a tablespoon. Once you've got everything in, shut her up, plug her in, and give this a zhuzh. You want this to be very smooth, so run it for a little while. Okay. So here's what we've got. Nice sort of burnt orange color. Some chunks of a little bit of garlic are okay, but you want to make sure there's no big chunks in there floating around. And let's give her a taste. That one's actually pretty good. I told you guys I was going to have to add more salt, but that is the perfect amount of salt. But always give it a taste after this step. Decide if it needs anything else, add it at this point. Okay. So our sauce is ready to go. We're gonna leave it just like this, and this can just sit aside until the pizza is ready for the treatment. So now we're gonna start throwing together our pizza. It's getting close to an hour, and this will take a few minutes for us to put together. The only reason why I waited this long to start the pizza is I'm gonna actually construct this pizza on the pizza peel, making it easy to transition right onto that stone. So to start out, we need to shape our dough. Your traditional pizzerias, they do the toss, they make it look cool. I'm not that good. I just go with a basic rolling pin. So my method is not flashy, but it gets the job done. So we'll get our surface ready here by putting down some bread flour, just again so the dough doesn't stick. And we can start just working this dough a little bit by hand. Okay, so as you're working this around, one of the things you're trying to do is to feel for those bubbles that yeast created. Those bubbles in the oven or in the smoker will expand. We've all seen those on pizzas. If you find them now and squish them, it saves you from that experience later. So once I've got it to a reasonable shape here, expand it out just a little bit, I'm gonna bring in my cheater rolling pin and really flatten this dough out. Just work it a couple different directions. If it's not a perfect circle, you're still gonna eat it. But I like to get as close as I can. Flattening the crust out like this with a rolling pin is gonna get you a nice crispy, sort of thin crust pizza. And the other benefit about using the rolling pin is it's a consistent, thin surface across the whole pizza. That looks pretty good. So here's where I bring in the pizza peel. This is, I think, a 20-inch pizza peel. Definitely worth investing in if you're going to be making a lot of pizzas. Transferring your pizza onto a hot pizza stone is difficult to do, especially think of an oven. It's got a top on it. You're trying to work your way in there. The pizza peel allows you to just shoot it right in. So we need this pizza peel to be slippery, or at least for the pizza to be able to slide off of it. So give this a good coat with your bread flour. This won't affect the flavor of the pizza. It's, like I said, it's just there to act as a little bit of a lubricating agent so that the pizza will slide right off. A lot of pizzerias will use cornmeal for this. I just use the bread flour because it's what I have and it works. So when I place the pizza on the bread peel, the pizza peel, I want it to be close to that front edge. I don't want to have this travel more distance than it has to get off of this, because once we get our ingredients on, it'll be a little bit precarious just to make sure everything stays in place. And throughout your prepping process, you can shake the peel and let that dough slide around a little bit, making sure that it's not sticking to the peel at any point. If there's extra flour on there, just wipe it off. It won't hurt, but it's what I do. Okay, so we're gonna bring in our sauce. Similar to our dough recipe, the sauce recipe is really meant for 4 12-inch pizzas or 3 16-inch pizzas. So after I make this pizza, I'm gonna put this in a container and save it for the other 2 when I make them. So you see how thin this sauce is now. Remember the water we took out? It would have been even thinner. I try and work the sauce to just under an inch from the crust. If I get a ½ inch, I'm happy. If it runs a little bit over, you can shoosh it right back in with your finger. Not a big deal. We'll get a little perimeter going. Give our ingredients some boundaries. Wherever it looks thin, shift a little more there. Wherever it looks thick, send it to somewhere it looks thin. All right, that looks about how we want it. At this point, we're just gonna sprinkle in a little bit of dried oregano. I said a little bit, I mean a little bit. A little bit goes a long way with oregano. I picked up this tip, I tried it the first time. I put on too much oregano. I thought, this is not a good tip. I'm never gonna do that again. But I tried it one more time with just a little bit. Just a little bit. And it did definitely elevate that pizza to another level. For our cheese, I'm just going with a basic fresh mozzarella cheese. At the grocery store where I shop, these come pre-sliced, but I found that if you just leave them on there like this, you get some pieces with really thick mozzarella on them. So I break these up. Now you don't need to cover the pizza with these pieces of mozzarella. They are going to expand a lot. So just lay them around as you're breaking them out with some space in between them. All right, that looks pretty good. I sampled the mozzarella just to make sure it was good. It's good. One thing that a lot of people do at this point in the pizza making process is add fresh shredded Parmesan and Asiago. I went and found a blend of Italian cheeses that has both Parmesan and Asiago in it, and it works just as good, way less work too. Now the cheese that's on there is gonna spread out. So with this cheese, it's just enhancing the flavor. I don't wanna cover what's already here, and you'll see how these will cook together. But I am trying to make a pizza that does end up with some sauce showing. That kind of looks like that traditional Neapolitan style of pizza. So that looks good. At this point too, I'm just gonna give our pizza a little jiggle. I had to give it a couple jiggles there to get some movement on the pizza. So it was just starting to stick a little bit. Give it a jiggle. And if you don't have a pizza peel, you don't need to use a pizza peel. Some people would just use a cookie sheet that's maybe turned over. So try this a few times. If you like it, go get yourself a pizza peel. I'm gonna garnish the top of this pizza by just ripping up a couple of basil leaves. Those are gonna add a nice color and flavor to our pizza. Okay, that looks good. At this point in the process, I'm just gonna treat this crust with a little bit of love. I've melted here some butter. Now I just use my fingers to do this. I use my fingers because it's just accurate. You could use a brush. You could also do this earlier in the process if you wanted to as well. But once I see what crust I'm left with, I warm up some butter and just come on and paint a little love around the outside of the pizza. This does three things. This adds a layer of flavor. This adds some texture. I think it tastes really nice when the butter is on there. Sort of softens the crust but adds a velvetiness to it. And the third thing is it gives it a really nice color. Now, this pizza will char right up. We're doing it at 700 degrees in charcoal, but the color you get with butter on it is definitely what I shoot for. All right, that looks good. Let's give her one little shake. Make sure she's loose. She's loose as a goose, guys. Let's get this bad boy on the smoker. Okay, our temperature is 702. It's been about an hour since this was at 700. It took about 12 minutes for the smoker to heat up from cold to 700. There we go. This pizza is gonna cook fast at 700 degrees. We'll see what it does. Check on it about 2 minutes in, give it a rotate, and give it about 2 minutes more, and she should be pretty close to done. Might as well while we're waiting. Cheers, guys. All right, it's been about 2 minutes. Oh yeah. Looking good. So we'll just try and rotate this around just a little bit. Might be hotter in the back or the front. Always give it a little turn. Check her out in about 2 more minutes. Now I'm going to bring you in close for this one, because what our barometer is for how good this pizza is done is the crust on the bottom. You know what color we're going for, guys. We're gonna look at it, see what she's giving us. 700 degrees on the Masterbuilt 1050. And I do not want to burn this pizza, so we're just gonna take a quick look. So on the bottom side, we're just starting to get that nice color. We're close. I'm gonna rotate this around a little more, and we're just gonna give this about maybe 30 to 40 more seconds. Okay. So we're getting some great color across the bottom. Now we can have that just a little bit darker, so I'm gonna give it another couple seconds here. All right. That looks great. Really nice. Woo. All right, let's get her inside. Now, to let this pizza cool down, this is just a Weber grill grate, but it works great as a pizza cooling rack. You don't need something like this, but if you use like a plate, or you were to set this just on the countertop surface, some condensation will form across the bottom, and you would just lose a little bit of that crispiness. Take a look at this pizza, you guys. Charcoal fire pizza on the Masterbuilt 1050. Love it. So we'll let this pizza rest for maybe 10 minutes. All right, so our pizza is ready to be cut. So we'll transfer this over to a cutting board. Now this is the test of how well we made our crust. And I wanted to bring the camera in nice and close so that you guys can hear it. I want to hear a crunch. Let's see. Oh yeah. Woo! Happy with that crunch. That crunch lets you know that your pizza stone was hot enough, that your dough set up the right way, and you cooked it the right way. Ooh, we'll cut the rest of those in a second. I gotta try this. This is my favorite part. So look at the bottom. Beautiful crust on there. A lot of that comes from that pizza stone. I don't know how that would differ putting it flat on the grates. I would not try putting it flat on the grates. The pizza's too soft. It would sink down. You really do need a pizza stone, or maybe a baking sheet. That might work. But whatever you do, put something on top of the grates if you're gonna make this on a Masterbuilt 1050. So there is our flex. She's nice and cooked. Look at that color again. Oh, fantastic. And it has that great sort of grittiness. It's got that bread flour on the bottom. All right. Super good. I think you can hear me crunch. It's crunchy, but it's soft on the inside. It's a moist pizza. The flavor on the bottom from the charcoal, the pizza stone changed color just a little bit while it was in there coming up to temperature. And I think it absorbed a little bit of that smoke from the charcoal because that's really coming through on the crust. Very good. That little bit of crushed red pepper we put on there, we can taste that. And the crust with our butter. Nice and crisp on the outside. Good crust. Just got a little bit of butteriness. It's subtle. You saw I didn't put very much on. But it elevates the crust. And that's why I do it. Yum. I'm gonna go take a piece to my beautiful taste tester waiting for this pizza to be done in the other room. I'll let you know what she thinks. She loved it. Alright. Thanks for watching another video of Jack and Blue Barbecue, everybody. Big fan of the pizza. Masterbuilt 1050 did a fantastic job. I will definitely do this again. Had a great time. So, thanks for joining, everybody. See you on the next video. Thanks for checking out my video. For more content like this, look me up on YouTube at Jack and Blue Barbecue.